Welcome to our channel, where we talk all things true crime. This video is for educational purposes.
Elizabeth Short was an aspiring actress whose life was tragically taken in 1947. Elizabeth is better known as the Black Dahlia. Her gruesome murder is one of the most famous unsolved cases in U.S. history. Like most unsolved murders, there is a lot of speculation and theories. Due to the extreme graphic details of this case, we want to give you a heads up, so if you need to skip it, we understand. We briefly touch on the mutilation, but we did not go into great detail about it. Let's get into it.
Elizabeth Short was born in Boston, Massachusetts on July 29, 1924. She was the third eldest of 5 sisters. Her family moved around several times before settling in Medford, Massachusetts. Her life was mostly ordinary, except in 1930, her father's car was found near a lake, abandoned, which led everyone to believe that he had ended it all. Her mother was a bookkeeper and raised the 5 girls on her own.
In late 1942, Elizabeth and her family found out her father was not dead and that he had abandoned them. He moved to California to start a new life. In December, Elizabeth wanted to reconnect with her father, so she headed to California. Her and her father argued a lot, and this led to Elizabeth moving out in January of 1943. Elizabeth took a job briefly at the base exchange at Camp Cook. She was living with a U.S. Army sergeant who was reported to abuse her. She moved to Santa Barbara in mid-1943. Elizabeth was arrested in September 1943 for underage drinking at a local bar. Authorities sent her back to Massachusetts, but instead she went to Florida and only occasionally visited her family in Boston.
While Elizabeth was in Florida, she had met Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr. He was training to be deployed to the Southeast Asia theater of World War II. Elizabeth told friends that Gordon had proposed to her and she had accepted his offer. Unfortunately, Gordon died in a plane crash on August 10, 1945. Almost a year later, she moved back to California. She spent the last 6 months of her life in Los Angeles. She was working as a waitress and rented a room behind a nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. Elizabeth is commonly associated with being an aspiring actress. However, during her time in Los Angeles, Elizabeth had no known acting credits or jobs.
On January 9, 1947, Elizabeth returned home from a trip to San Diego with a 25-year-old married salesman named Robert "Red" Manley that she had been dating. She was dropped off by Robert at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown LA. Elizabeth was meeting her sister, who was visiting from Boston. Some of the staff said they did remember Elizabeth using the lobby telephone. People also claimed that they saw Elizabeth at the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge, less than a mile away from the hotel.
There's not much information after the 9th of January until her body was found on the morning of January 15, 1947. Elizabeth's body was found in the neighborhood of Leimert Park, which was mostly undeveloped at the time. Elizabeth's body was severely mutilated. Her body was completely severed at the waist and drained of blood, leaving her skin extremely white. Elizabeth's face was also cut from the corners of her mouth to her ears. We won't go into more of the horrific mutilations to Elizabeth's body, but her body had also been posed, with her hands over her head, elbows bent at right angles, and her legs spread apart.
Elizabeth was identified by fingerprints, which were on file from her 1943 arrest. Reporters from the Los Angeles Examiner contacted Elizabeth's mother in Boston and told her that her daughter Elizabeth had won a beauty contest. The reporters did this to get as much personal detail on Elizabeth. It was only after that they got this information that they revealed that her daughter was murdered. The Examiner also offered to pay Elizabeth's mother's airfare and accommodations if she would come to LA and help the police in the investigation. This was just another ploy to keep Elizabeth's mother away from other reporters to protect their scoop. More newspapers sensationalized the case. In one article, it stated that Elizabeth Short was last seen in a tight skirt and a sheer blouse. The media gave Elizabeth the Black Dahlia nickname. They described Elizabeth as an adventuress that prowled Hollywood Boulevard.
At the beginning of the investigation, there were 750 officers that worked the case. There were multiple locations searched for potential evidence, but these searches didn't bring forward any more evidence. There was also a $10,000 reward offered for any information leading to the killer. After the reward was announced, there were several people that came forward with confessions. Most of these were false, and the false confessors were charged with obstruction of justice. The Examiner had received letters about Elizabeth Short's murder on January 21st. A person called the editor of the Examiner and claimed that they had killed Elizabeth and to expect some souvenirs of Beth Short in the mail. Just 3 days later, a suspicious envelope was discovered that was addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other LA papers. The words were cut and pasted from newspaper clippings, and it had a large message on the face of the envelope saying, "Here is Dahlia's belongings." Inside the envelope was Elizabeth's birth certificate, photographs, business cards, an address book with the name Mark Hansen on the cover. There were also names written on a piece of paper.
Police quickly named Mark Hansen as a suspect. Hansen was a wealthy man that owned a nightclub and a theater. Elizabeth's roommate and friend Anna told investigators that Elizabeth had rejected advances from Hansen, and that could be a possible motive. He was cleared of suspicion in the case. The LAPD interviewed over 150 men that they believed could have been suspects. The married man that was last seen with Elizabeth was also investigated, but after passing many polygraph tests, he was also cleared of suspicion. The police interviewed several people that were found in Hansen's address book.
On January 26th, the Examiner received another letter that was handwritten. It said, "Here it is. Turning in Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at police. Black Dahlia Adventure." The letter included a place that the killer would turn himself in at. Police waited at the location at 10 a.m. on the 29th, and the alleged killer never showed up. The Examiner received a letter at 1 p.m. on the 29th that was again a cut and pasted letter, which said, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." Due to the graphic nature of the crime and the letters received by the Examiner after the crime, it resulted in a media circus. Elizabeth's murder was being reported on by both local and national publications. Most of them reprinted sensationalized reports. These reports suggest that Elizabeth had been tortured for hours prior to her death. This was proven false, but the police allowed the reports to be circulated so they could conceal the true cause of death from the public, which was cerebral hemorrhage.
Some of the reports would include Elizabeth's personal life, including her supposedly rejecting Hansen's advances. An exotic dancer who was an acquaintance of Elizabeth told police that she liked to get guys worked up over her and then she'd leave them hanging dry. Some of the reporters thought it was possible that she was not attracted to men. By February, the case had no new leads to pursue. Newspapers continued to run stories about the murder and investigation.
The lead investigator, Captain Jack Donahue, told the press that he believed that Elizabeth was taken to a remote place on the outskirts of LA, and then her body was brought back to the city to be disposed of. The cuts were precise, and the fact that she was cut in half, the police looked into the possibility that Elizabeth was murdered by a doctor, a surgeon, or someone with medical knowledge. Mid-February 1947, the LAPD got a warrant to see the list of students at the University of Southern California Medical School. Background checks were done, but nothing came of it. With no new leads by the spring of 1947, Elizabeth's murder became a cold case.
There are a ton of theories surrounding Elizabeth's murder. There was speculation that she was involved in the underworld or had connections to organized crime. The theory suggests that her death was a result of a mob hit or a personal vendetta. Another theory is a jealous lover or rivalry. The theory that the killer had medical expertise seems likely given the mutilation. Some other theories included a serial killer, Hollywood connection, and police corruption. There has been some notable suspects. Norman Chandler was the publisher of the Los Angeles Times and allegedly impregnated Elizabeth while she was working as a call girl. Mark Hansen, due to his connection to Elizabeth, and he was one of the last people to talk to her before her death.
Dr. George Hill Hodel Jr. became a suspect in 1949 when he was accused of assaying his 14-year-old daughter. Some believed he was involved in Elizabeth's murder, but there is no evidence linking him to the case. After Dr. Hodel's death, his son accused his father as the Black Dahlia killer. Steve Hodel was an LAPD homicide detective. Dr. Hodel was suspected in the death of his secretary but was never charged. There were notes from the 1949 grand jury report that investigators had wiretapped the doctor's home and had a recorded conversation of him with another person saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyways, now they have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary."
Despite the suspects and the investigations, the Black Dahlia case remains unsolved. And like London's Jack the Ripper murders, the case continues to command interest and speculation. Elizabeth Short's life and death has been the basis of many books and films. It is one of the oldest unsolved cases in Los Angeles County and one of the most famous unsolved murders in the U.S. history.
So what do we think?
I've always found this case very interesting. Just how wild it got with the speculation that she was a call girl. All these things when there's literally no proof that she was promiscuous at all.
Yeah, no.
Just because she wore maybe a tight skirt. Of course, it's different times.
You had said it kind of sounded like she was just looking for a husband because she was engaged to the guy that died in the plane. And then she was in the relationship with the guy at the military base.
Yeah, and again, it's always like she's associated with being an aspiring actress, but there's really no proof of that either.
No, she was known to be beautiful.
Yeah, she was a petite, pretty, dark-headed girl.
The fact that the journalist called the mother and said that she had won a beauty pageant trying to get information about her daughter when her daughter was already dead is just horrible.
It is horrifying. I don't know why anybody would do that, how anybody could do that.
Then they offered to pay for her airfare to come out, help them work the case, but really he just wanted to keep all the information to himself because he was getting a lot of attention for
the case.
Yeah. And he wanted to keep the mom as close to him as possible so that he could be the first one to break any new news.
Because it does say that she was dating a married man. It doesn't state whether or not she knew he was married.
Yeah, there's a possibility that she didn't know.
That they saw her at a lounge, which I get in the 40s, it wasn't necessarily more acceptable for single women to be out and hanging around. But again, it's not saying that she did anything with them. Just the nature of what happened to her body, it seems like that person would have had some sort of medical knowledge. Because whenever she was severed, you would have to go in between vertebrae. So I don't know any normal person that didn't know medical terminology or anything about medical or the human body.
Or medical procedures or
could
using
do
scalpels. Who do you think did it?
I'm really not sure, but the doctor one seems pretty possible. The fact that his son came out, he had investigated it, but the son had claimed that he had found a photo at his dad's house that could have possibly been Elizabeth Short. She could have been dating him.
Or maybe he became obsessed with her.
Possibly.
The fact that they said they had wiretappings of the home, I don't know that I necessarily believe that because it seems like the police in this case was corrupt. So whether those recordings exist or not, I don't know. But the fact that the son came forward, I believe makes it more believable. And the fact that he was suspected in ending his secretary's life.
And also essaying his own daughter.
That leads to more possibility, I feel like, of him being the guy. But we don't know. And he's dead.
The son was LAPD homicide detective.
I would hope that not everything about the case was being reported to the media, but maybe there were things that was just kept within the investigation that he was aware of that others weren't.
And possibly uncovered stuff that maybe the police did ignore.
When he was investigating on his own.
Yeah, probably that one, to be honest, because the other guys that maybe took Elizabeth out or she had dated them at some point, it's a possibility. It seems like maybe the doctor would be more plausible.
Likely.
Yeah.
And she rejected the advances of the Hansen guy, and although he passed polygraph tests, but if she had rejected him, that's some kind of motive.
Usually crimes of passion, that was pretty detailed what they did.
It seems like someone possibly knew her. They say that she possibly was pregnant by?
The publisher of the Los Angeles Times, Norman Chandler.
So Norman Chandler, it was alleged that he had gotten her pregnant. She was cut in half. Was any of her abdomen missing?
No, but I mean, they did an autopsy. It showed that she had never been pregnant. Again, all speculation. People's imagination, I feel, run wild. And then the way she was mutilated was shocking. I mean, it would be shocking now. I couldn't imagine in the 40s.
Why did they name her Black Dahlia?
Well, there was a movie that had recently came out called The Blue Dahlia, but it was a female actress that wore a blue dress, and so they had nicknamed her that because she always wore black.
Oh, interesting.
It's just kind of weird. There's a lot of theories. The serial killer one, to my knowledge, there's not any other killings that are like hers. I've not heard of any other women being
displayed in this manner.
Yeah. I mean, if there is, you guys can let us know and we can definitely look into it.
That's in that time period, yeah.
Yeah. police corruption, that's not unrealistic. I believe that. Hollywood connection, believe that. Who knows? Maybe she had found some stuff out about somebody.
Yeah, because the person that sent that first package and Hanson's address book was in there. Where did they get it? Did they get it from Elizabeth? Why did she have it? Did she take it for a reason?
Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of seemed like she was a naive young woman, possibly just looking for a husband. And it's sad that everybody always remembers her as the Black Dahlia, as the picture. If you guys have not seen it, I would definitely be careful Googling it because there are very, very graphic photos of her body.
I've just seen one from a distance where you can see that the body is separated. Yeah, I'm not too interested in physically seeing them myself. So what do you guys think? Do you have a theory on who's done it? Have you heard any other theories that we didn't cover today? Let us know in the comments below.